Hi everyone, my name is Srijan and today we are going to discuss how to flip debates at reply speech. Um, 30 minutes of prep, six substantive speeches, you made all your arguments, you made all your rebuttals, and there is very little that you can do. So the first thing that we'll start with is what you cannot do in reply speech. Then we'll talk about two important ways in which you can make your replies more powerful. That is by changing the contextual frame and then changing the strategic frame of the debate. All right. Um, you know that you cannot bring new arguments or rebuttals. You also cannot radically shift the direction of the debate, and you cannot change the past. That is, what you have said, you have said. What your opponents have said, they have said. Um, this is important because this informs what you can actually do. So the first thing is what I like to call contextual framing. So that is, you frame your reply speech in the context of the world that allows your argument to penetrate. Now, that basically means you create or explain the problem in the world that your argument solves. You create how important the value is that your argument solves. And you can do the same thing for neutralizing the contextual frame for opposition's argument, right? So you are basically evolving the judge's understanding of the world and the real problems in the world to make sure that your argument fits. Secondly, you can weaponize the strategic advantages your team has. Now, what could be those advantages? So, for example, let's say opposition did not rebuttal a major argument from your side or did not spend much time doing it. Now, try to make that argument debate winning. But the benefit of the fact that they did not rebuttal that argument means the logic of that argument in the mind of the judge is intact or probably less targeted. So what that basically means is if there is very little deconstruction for that logic, you can focus on illustrating the impact a little bit more because a large part of that impact will realize. If the judge already believes this argument happens, then they have to believe that the impact happens. So a couple of things that you can try to clarify. One, you want to place your arguments in a real world context, right? So arguments are already done. You want to explain that the problem in the debate is so deep that it needs your argument. So the reason why this works is the examples from real world are highly scalable, right? So there are so many things happening in the world at the same time, and we can choose to look at world from different lenses. I can give you 10 reasons why the world is a horrible place to live, and I can also give you 10 reasons to suggest why the world is a fascinating place to live. For example, I can talk about climate change and the catastrophic consequence we have in the future. Everyone who is burned faces suffering, they have to die, stuff like that, to talk about suffering in general and problems in the world. But I can also talk about increased life expectancy, how we don't die from diseases, how we can say that our convenience has increased, our awareness has increased, we have become smarter, a lot of those things, and then say that the world is a good place to live in. So what I'm clarifying here is we have enough examples from the world that we can scale in the mind of the judge so that they believe that example is real. So let's see an example here. So for example, there's a debate. This House would consider victims' perspective when sentencing criminals. I think it's a very common debate. I think I'll show you what the interaction between prop and op is and how you can resolve this to win at reply. Okay, so I think it's very obvious. Prop will say victims are irrational, traumatized, they are bad judges, they don't consider all the factors. Judges are more objective, they are the experts. We create more order and stability in society if you make better decisions about criminal justice system, and victims obviously aren't good judges, right? Now, from op, you'd say victims are more directly affected, they deserve to be heard, they will get closer when this happens, and this will deter criminals from committing the crime. Now, one of the obvious differences that you see here is the stakeholder that they are prioritizing, right? So let's say you are on op and you want to win this class. Now, I think one of the strategic ways to show that this is important for you is by removing the importance of other stakeholders in this debate. So I think one way in which you can do that is to explain who owns the crime or who experiences the crime. So in this case, I think a way to look at it is crime basically is a transaction between a criminal and a victim. It was not an attack in a society, attack towards society. It was not an attack towards judge. So the only person who lived the experience of the crime was victim. And to not include them in decision making is to deny them of that agency. So what this does is it isolates other stakeholders and it just positions victims as the most important one. So the framing you would do on reply is saying that the reason why our stakeholders or victims are important is they are the only ones who are affected by the crime. Neither state nor side proposition faces the extent or the effect of the crime. That is why our stakeholder that we proved are the most important. Strategic framing. So the way I want to understand strategic framing is this happens within the debate, right? So contextual framing happens outside the debate. It's like, what are the conditions that enable this debate to occur? Strategic framing is what actually happened. Now, few ways in which you can weaponize this to win at reply. One is identify and emphasize your path to victory. What that basically means is if you have three arguments in your debate, all of these three arguments should not just be isolated pieces that prove different points, but they should work together to pave a path for your victory. So that means, let's say the first argument fulfills one step towards that direction. Second argument helps you achieve that burden by fulfilling another part. And the third argument probably helps you on that path as well. So it is easy for you to plot this path to victory. So you win these micro battles of these individual arguments, but you also win this macro battle of being able to meet your burden, right? So you have to think of that larger framing. Okay, we prove this, we prove this, we prove this, and this is how we plot our victory. So you want to try to explain how that path to victory is debate winning. Identify and dismantle opposition's path to victory. The problem with a path or a path to victory, there are too many steps, right? If you can just break down one of the steps, you can say they do not meet the necessary criteria to be victorious. Sometimes it is a stakeholder, sometimes it is an argument, sometimes it is a situation that happens which probably does not happen. So you can always try to attack the weakest link in the chain to try to make sure that their path to victory does not realize. Now, just because you attack their path to victory doesn't mean that opposition's all arguments are discredited. It just means they cannot integrate all of these arguments into winning a case for them without repairing that particular link. And it will be too late at reply. So you can try to identify holes in the case. You can sow those paths to win. Next, focus on your strongest arguments. There is a class that is easy to win for one side. So maybe that class is, let's say, a utility class. You are more likely to win utilitarian arguments from your side, right? So in that case, you want to try to show why that is the most important thing and how you can do it by using framing and weighing. Right? So weighing works very well with utility-based classes because what you can say is more people, more number, more urgent, right? All of these things are the ways in which you can frame your impacts to make it matter, right? So that is something that you can try and work. So just to reemphasize how you do weighing, you can compare the scale of impact. Like we have 100 people affected, everyone dies, right? So that's an impact there. Intensity, urgency. So there are two ways to frame urgency. So for example, if you are framing, let's say, economy versus environment, and you are on the side that supports economy, then it's like, if you don't do this, people die right now. And the impacts to the environment will probably occur in the future, but protecting the jobs of the workers that work on these mines is much more crucial at this particular time because they will not live to see another day. But if you want to make, let's say, climate change more urgent, then the framing that you do is not that the world will end tomorrow. It's more like, if you don't act now, then there is no way we could save the world, right? So even if the impact is on the future, you are putting this action on the present. So it's like, if you don't act now, this happens, right? So that is how you can make a future event urgent. Okay, you can use those kind of framing to also convey urgency of your case. Next, always try to structure around core questions that you have to answer to win the debate and the places in which the debate sips or where it clashes, right? So yeah, you can try to do this. Another thing, zoom out, don't zoom in. What that basically means is discuss the conclusions that you have won, focus on the meta debate, the values you preserve. You don't have the time to do all the details. I would encourage that you almost work with your third speaker in delivering. So, for example, if you're the opposition reply, you want to think of yourself as like a collective block of 7 + 4 minutes piece. So your third rebuttal speaker or third opposition speaker, they can do like a lot of attack work by focusing entirely on rebuttals, and they would just skip the summary part, they would skip the weighing part a little bit, and you can exclusively do that weighing. So what that gives is third speaker can actually give you more materials to work with on the reply speech. So if you work with them, that's good because there's one continuous block of speech. Now, I recognize that there's this discontinuity with affirmative reply, but the way in which they can change this is they are the last people to speak, so they can always almost prioritize something that opposition side completely missed and make sure that they cannot ever get that back because there is no chance for them to come back and change that, right? There is only one instance in which mechanizing your argument in reply can be seen as an acceptable practice. That is when the opposition team has grossly mischaracterized the debate and has made it seem like your debate or that argument does not matter. So, your attempt to reanalyze that argument should be to expose the parts that still make it true, right? So you want to clarify exactly how it was mischaracterized and what argument actually is, but that is only if it is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, look at the big picture. The last thing I want to say here in regards to strategic framing is you want to do a charitable framing, right? And that almost starts with like a even if argument. You're like, even if you achieve this, we still win the debate. Now, to be really honest, there is no best case, worst case trade that actually is true in a debate, right? So what I'm trying to clarify here is if you win in opposition's worst case scenario, in opposition's best case scenario with your worst case scenario, then the debate obviously isn't balanced. But what you can win is a very specific issue, and you are also at the same time trying to prioritize certain values that are different from oppositions. You're not prioritizing value that is better from opposition, but something that is different, and that is what you can make better. So, for example, I think classic deontology utilitarian argument is like, even if you save the world, it is wrong to do this horrible thing, right? Or let's say hurt someone in the process because they did not consent to that. So you are ending the world for this person that you affected. So that is why it is not worth doing it. So you are trying to paint it like, even if the context is desirable, the action is not desirable. Or even if they win this class, or you don't win everything else. All right. Let's see this example once. So this house supports tough on crime policies in high crime areas. Now, a couple of things that I want to work with on this. Proposition side will say tough on crime policies will create a higher deterrence to crime. These are bad people doing bad things. They should be punished. They'll say, our objective is to make neighborhoods safe by punishing these people. Opposition will say, these people are the victims of state failure. You should not punish them. They are the victims of societal failure. You'd also say they are functional units, even if they are violent units at times. You will be sending important human resource to jail. And if your idea of protecting the community is by sending its people to jail, then definitely you are doing something wrong, whatever it is, right? So if this is the interaction that has happened in the debate, then how do you resolve this as a reply speaker? Now, I think one way in which you can try to do it is by explaining that the values opposition wants to protect are dependent on the path are dependent on the impact that you have at proposition side. So for example, if you want to make sure that this place exists as a functional economic unit, if you want to make sure that these people don't continue to remain victims of state failure, like they said, you have to maintain a certain level of stability in the society. And that cannot happen with the criminal component roaming around. That stability that you achieve on your side by keeping these people in jail or whatever is the only way in which you achieve other impacts. Now, again, you could argue if stability does not occur from opposition side, but yeah, that's basically it. So the way I've tried to clarify this is that there are so many tricks that you can use. You can pick any of these tricks to flip the debate in reply. Doesn't always work because debates are already written by the time reply speech happens, but this is your chance to write the ballot. All right, thank you.